I'm VJ Hamilton and welcome to the Autoimmune Reset, the place for you to learn how to thrive with autoimmune disease and feel empowered to take steps to transform your health to feel better than ever. You can start making changes today to improve your health. So with every episode, my mission is to share with you simple ways to up-level your diet and lifestyle with key learnings from my own journey reversing autoimmune disease and inspirational stories from those who have reset their autoimmune symptoms and are now thriving in life. I suffered from autoimmune disease for over 25 years and now I live symptom-free, and I wish the same for you as well. So thank you for being here and sharing this time with me. Now let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to this Friday 5 episode of the Autoimmune Reset podcast. I'm your host, VJ Hamilton. I'm a nutritionist, scientist, and I'm the founder of the Autoimmune Nutrition Clinic. Today, I want to talk about something practical because one of the questions I get asked all the time is, what do I actually eat now that I'm gluten-free? And if you are not aware, I've been gluten-free for well over a decade now. And when people first hear that, they often assume it must feel really restrictive or difficult. And the reality is that whilst the first few weeks can feel quite overwhelming, once you discover a few simple swaps, it becomes surprisingly easy. In fact, I would go as far to say that I eat a far more varied diet now than I did before I removed gluten. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is immediately heading to the gluten-free aisle and trying to replace every food they used to eat with a gluten-free version, such as gluten-free bread or gluten-free biscuits or gluten-free cakes or gluten-free pasta. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some excellent gluten-free products available now, and I still enjoy some of them from time to time. But some of the best gluten-free swaps aren't found in the gluten-free aisle at all. They're simply whole foods that happen to work brilliantly in place of foods that contain gluten. So today I wanted to share 5 of my favorites, and these are foods I genuinely eat myself. I recommend to clients regularly. And most importantly, I actually enjoy them too. The first one is courgetti instead of pasta. The goal isn't always to recreate the original food perfectly. Sometimes it's about finding something different that you enjoy in its own right. What I love about courgetti is that it carries all the flavors that make a pasta dish enjoyable. Like you can top it with a rich bolognese or mix in some pesto. You could add a slow-cooked ragu. Even just garlic and olive oil is really nice. And you still get all those wonderful flavors, but you're also increasing your vegetable intake. And you can do this with butternut squash as well. I will sometimes make butternut squash noodles in place of pasta. And the thing that I like about doing this is because you are increasing your vegetables. It's so hard to get all those vegetables that are recommended in a day. Some of the studies are now saying 10 different types of vegetables, fruits, and plant-based foods every day. And if you make this type of switch, then it's much easier to get the vegetables in because you're replacing a lot of the foods that maybe don't have as much nutrients in them, such as pasta. And it's not to say pasta isn't enjoyable, but you can then replace it with a food like courgette or zucchini, as it's called in the US, or with butternut squash, and you're getting the food in as well, and all those delicious polyphenols too. I often feel a lot lighter afterwards when I use courgetti rather than pasta. And you can also mix the courgetti into the pasta, so you're having a mix of both if you are eating gluten-free pasta. And there are lots of good options when it comes to gluten-free pastas now as well. When you combine the courgetti and the pasta together, it really creates a lovely texture, increasing the fiber, and it means you don't feel as though you're sacrificing everything. And for many of my clients with autoimmune conditions, digestive issues, bloating or fatigue, this can be a really simple but effective swap. And you can get things like spiralizers and other tools that can help you to make courgetti more easily. Now, number 2 is tamari or coconut aminos instead of soy sauce. I absolutely love soy sauce, and this is probably one of the easiest gluten-free swaps you can make. Many people don't realize that traditional soy sauce often contains wheat. When I was away recently, I ate in a Japanese restaurant, and I asked for some sushi, and actually even in the sushi rice, there was some soy sauce and it had to be made from scratch for me. So even if you've removed bread, pasta, cakes and cereals, you may still be consuming gluten through sauces and condiments without realizing it. And I worked with a client a while ago now, but I only saw him once and he'd done one of the stool tests that I offer. And it became clear to me that he had an issue with gluten and he wasn't eating gluten, but he was still eating soy sauce. And I said, for some people, you just need to take it fully out of the diet because you will still be getting that immune reaction if you even have small amounts. And he did. And then he messaged me and he told me that all of his symptoms had gone away when he'd fully taken gluten out of the diet. And I haven't seen him since. And to be honest, when I see people like that and it's almost like there's one thing that's affecting them, I rarely see them again because they're feeling so good. But tamari has become a staple in my kitchen. It has that rich, savory, umami flavor that makes stir fries, marinades, dressings, and dipping sauces taste fantastic. I love that salty flavor. In fact, many people actually prefer it once they try it. So if you're also avoiding soy, you may want to try coconut aminos, which is another great option. They have a slightly sweeter flavor, but still provide that satisfying depth that makes a meal feel complete. It's one of those changes that takes almost no effort, but can make a meaningful difference if you're trying to follow a truly gluten-free diet. The next is quinoa or chia porridge instead of oats. And this one surprises people. Now, before anybody writes in, yes, oats themselves do not naturally contain gluten. However, oats are commonly contaminated during growing and processing, which is why people with celiac disease often need those certified gluten-free oats if they are consuming oats. And even then, some people simply don't tolerate them particularly well. There is a protein in oats called avenin, and some individuals appear to react to it in a similar way to gluten-containing grains. And I find people who are eating oats tend to be eating them every morning or just consuming a lot of them. And I used to love oats myself, and I realized they probably weren't helping or serving me, but it was just something that I got into a routine with at work. I would just grab some oats on my way to work with lots of peanut butter and some berries, and I just couldn't wait to eat it. And I just got into that routine with it. But once taking oats out, I did feel a lot better. I still eat oats occasionally, but I'm not consuming them like I used to. And I'm only consuming the gluten-free oats. I prefer things like quinoa or chia. And I certainly have clients who feel dramatically better when they remove oats for a period of time as well. One of my favorite alternatives is quinoa porridge because it's warm, it's filling, it's actually surprisingly creamy when cooked properly and provides more protein than many traditional breakfast cereals because it has an amazing amino acid profile too. I often add cinnamon, you can add berries, flax or nuts, and even a scoop of collagen to add in the nutrients to the quinoa porridge as well. And another favorite is chia pudding. It's incredibly simple to prepare. It travels well. I just used to make it and put it in an old nut butter jar for a while when I was working. And it creates a breakfast that provides healthy fats, it has fiber, and it helps release steady energy throughout the morning. What I particularly like about both options is that they tend to keep people fuller for longer and often support more stable blood sugar levels compared to many breakfast cereals. Next is buckwheat instead of couscous. And buckwheat has to be one of the most misunderstood foods because despite its name, it's absolutely nothing to do with wheat. It's naturally gluten-free and has been used for centuries in many traditional cuisines around the world. I often use buckwheat, particularly in salads, lunch bowls, or alongside slow-cooked dishes, and it has that lovely nutty flavour and provides a different texture that many people enjoy once they become familiar with it. And from a nutritional perspective, it's also rich in magnesium and manganese and contains more nutrients than many of the refined grains. So one of the things I love about buckwheat is that it doesn't actually feel like a substitution. It feels like a food worth eating in its own right. And I think that's where long-term success comes from when it comes to making these changes in your diet. And last but not least are nori wraps or lettuce wraps instead of using bread for sandwiches. And this final swap is one I use surprisingly often, and it's particularly good when you're traveling or when you're busy. even when you're standing at an airport and wondering what on earth are you going to eat, if you have one of these wraps with you, it can be much easier. And many people become heavily reliant on gluten-free bread. And again, there are some good gluten-free bread options available now, but when you first remove gluten, you might just consume a lot of gluten-free produce first. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's always helpful to have an alternative. Nori wraps are one of my favorites. You can fill them with salmon, avocado, cucumber, chicken, hummus, leftover roast meat, vegetables, and pretty much anything you would normally put into a sandwich. And not only are they naturally gluten-free, but they also provide minerals and trace nutrients that you simply don't get from many bread products. I also like large lettuce leaves. So if I'm going to somebody's house and they might be sharing food or dips, then lettuce leaves can be really helpful. And you can make like a turkey mince with lots of vegetables in it and have it in a lettuce leaf. And I find them really delicious. It just feels really fresh. You're getting all the good nutrients of whatever you put in the lettuce leaf. And it's just, it can be quite good for children as well. You can fill that up with some mince, like some healthy mince or turkey mince that has vegetables in it, and have the lettuce leaves out and eat it that way. And what I often find is when clients start using these alternatives occasionally, they realize that they don't actually miss bread as much as they expected in any case. So the biggest lesson I've learned after going gluten-free wasn't how to find better gluten-free products, although I do like sourcing and finding gluten-free products for my clients. It was how to discover more foods, more ingredients, more flavors, more variety. When I was doing AIP, again, there are a lot of foods that you can't eat when you are doing the elimination phase of the AIP diet, and you just become more inventive. And at first, it does take more effort. But when we focus on what we're removing, gluten-free or AIP can feel very restrictive. But when we focus on what we're adding, it can become surprisingly exciting. And there are so many naturally gluten-free foods available that most of us never really explored before making any dietary changes, like quinoa, like buckwheat, like different vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, different fish or herbs or spices. And there are so many different cuisines, different cooking methods, different ingredients. And I share a recipe in my newsletter every week just to give you some ideas of the different foods you can eat and how to make tasty meals, but that are quite simple too, because I like convenience. And I know not all of my recipes are that straightforward, but I like to make sure that you can make it minimal ingredients and in a short space of time, because if I have to get out the food processor, then that to me just feels a little bit overwhelming. So I like to find recipes that I can just make quite easily myself, and hopefully you find that as well. So if you haven't signed up for my newsletter, you can download my free guide, the Autoimmunity Recovery Plan, which is linked in the show notes, and you will then be signed up to my mailing list, and you will get that newsletter every week, which is called the Sunday Roundup, which I send out on a Sunday. But in many ways, going gluten-free expanded my diet rather than shrinking it, and perhaps that's the perspective I'd love you to take away from today's episode. Don't ask yourself what you need to remove. Ask yourself what new foods you might discover. So thank you for listening today. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd absolutely love it if you could subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody who is considering going gluten-free. And if you're based in the UK and would like a copy of my favorite gluten-free brands and products, I've put together a free list for you. Simply click the link in the show notes to download your copy. If you have any questions, pop over to my Instagram at the Autoimmunity Nutritionist. If not, I'll speak to you soon and have a fantastic weekend. Take care. Thank you very much for joining me today on the Autoimmune Reset. I really hope you enjoyed the discussion, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. And if you liked it, I would hugely appreciate a review on iTunes, as it helps me understand what you like about the podcast and to help share the information with more people. I'm excited to speak to you next time. And remember, you have the power to take the reins on your health. So keep the faith and celebrate the small wins. Until next time.